Thank you all for being here. This is a conversation we've had many times at this table, but I think this one will go a little bit different as we move forward. Billy, I'm going to start with you. As I alluded to, there have been attempts at the state level to create some type of a state-funded preschool program. You have been at the table for many of those conversations. Why do you think that it is that so many lawmakers have heartburn with pushing this forward?
I think it's probably a number of things. I think sometimes there's a lack of understanding to some degree. They don't know a lot about the issue, and it's maybe new to them, or maybe they don't want to know about it. But there are a lot of people that do want to learn more as we move along, but a lot of it comes down to the resources, and they have balked at it because of the cost without looking at the benefit on the other side, not only the learning benefit but the economic benefit. There are a lot of studies out there that show anywhere from $7 to $13 of a return on every dollar invested, which is a huge return on investment. I mean, I work in investments on a daily basis, and if you could earn that every year, all my clients would be pretty happy with that. And so we got to look at it as more of an investment and look at it as a positive. So when I've pushed legislation that maybe failed for like a pilot program or something like that, I then moved on to talking about, well, we just need an advisory council so that we can gather data, that we can show legislators, educate legislators and the public about the incredible benefits of early childhood education. And so I think a lot of times it's failed because of a lack of education and a lack of focus on investment rather than the resources available.
Speaking of that advisory council, I know you weren't in the legislative session last year, but Representative Aaron Healy did try to push legislation that would create an advisory council, and it too was given the thumbs down. What were you hearing were the reasons why?
Well, I was in on, I brought that similar bill 2 or 3 sessions in a row prior to that, and she picked up kind of where I left off. I was really happy to see that she was doing that because it's so important. It was something I'm so passionate about. I have a 3.5-year-old at home named Liam, and let me tell you, when you watch how much of a sponge a kid is, like, there's no doubt in my mind the importance of early learning and access to those opportunities. And so to have that council in place is just a first step. It's a building block. The challenge, one of the reasons people didn't want it in peer is they thought it was opening up this Pandora's box, that if you had this council, then you were automatically going to have to spend all this money. That just wasn't the case. I think there's a fear that if you put this together, that it's going to get out of hand or something, and that's just unfounded. Really, all we want to do is put together a group of people that are going to kind of study the issue and tell us where we're lacking. Tell us where we can find and make gains, and maybe we can target our support of early learning to areas that maybe have a lack of support.
Let's talk about that conversation in peer, which it's hard to believe, but it's only a handful of months away, if that. Does that conversation in peer need to change, or do you think that those that believe in some type of a state-funded program need to stay the course and continue to fight for it?
I think it's too important of an issue to not continue to build support at the state level. We're one of a handful of states that doesn't offer state support for early childhood education. And that, to me, I mean, we're behind. And there are thousands of kids that are getting left out that maybe aren't part of Head Start, or they're on a waiting list to participate and to learn. And we're putting those kids at a disadvantage compared to other kids, and that's just not right. So I think it's too important of a conversation to just say, no, we'll just stop talking about it there. We'll just move on. I mean, even knowing that when I brought legislation that it might fail, that doesn't mean that I can't make gains and that I can't continue to get more people on board and build support. And also, there's another generation of leaders coming that are going to be taking those seats. And we need to continue that conversation and make sure they're educated and that they're on the forefront of bringing change to South Dakota.
Carmen, I want to move to you, and before we talk about where you know, you and others in the industry want to see this conversation go. You've been on before talking about Head Start. Just briefly remind our viewers what Head Start is.
Head Start is a federally funded program that was started in 1965 to support families and children in a war on poverty. And so federal grant funds come to local grantees in different forms. My grant comes in here to the University of South Dakota. Others are school districts or CAP agencies. And it's a community-based program designed to serve children from low-income families. And there are services provided directly into the home. There are other services provided through a classroom setting. So how Head Start looks in each community varies. It's based on the needs of the community, but it's available to children across our state.
I'm going to talk about what we've seen in peer because I know you've been around when those conversations have been going on. How would you like to see future conversations go in terms of early learning in our state? Is it state funded? Is it not? What should it look like?
I think my fear is having at least some conversations. What would happen if the federal dollars were not available in our state to serve low-income families? That's, I think, worth a conversation to have. And what resources might we have or options? And I think it needs to really be more than educators bringing the issue forward. It is an economic issue. It is a workforce development issue in our state. Parents who have young children and want to work need quality early childhood experiences. In some communities, it's an access issue, and certainly I think there is a question about quality across the state. So, but I do think it has to be a broader conversation and not just coming at it from the education point of view, because I think the discussion is much broader outside of that.
Jessica, you come to us from the South Dakota Association for the Education of Young Children. What is this program?
The South Dakota Association for the Education of Young Children is the state affiliate for the National Association for the Education of Young Children. We promote high-quality early learning experiences for all young children, birth through age 8. We also serve as a connector to resources for anyone that's working in the early learning profession, for young children and their families, and then also for anyone who is providing any type of services or support for young children and their families as well.
So when we talk about the conversation in peer, what do you hope that conversation will look like?
Well, I think there's a couple of different perspectives on this issue. On the one hand, we are getting a lot of media coverage and there's a lot of momentum as far as the conversation goes surrounding early learning. There's been a lot of newspaper coverage and television coverage and all kinds of things for the past couple of years, which has only been growing. And so it seems like it's a good time to continue those conversations in peer, to continue looking at what options are for presenting other bills. But on the other hand, it seems like every time we bring something forward, and this is for the past couple of years as well as the past couple of decades, we get the same arguments. And so there's a potential there that I think needs to be tapped into for some relationship building, for some, also, as Billy had mentioned, for some education, and just to really help outline what we mean when we're talking about early learners and early learning, and really getting the message across that we're talking about quality and resources for all children. In all environments, that this isn't a question of state mandating, it's a question of state funding.
Okay.